Just referring back to the disclaimer. Please note that I am not a qualified financial counsellor, nor am I in any way a qualified financial advisor. Please do not take this video content as any kind of financial advice. It is not intended for that purpose. This is my personal story and my personal journey for your entertainment purposes only. I am sharing this information because I feel compelled by my higher self or source guidance, or however you do or do not relate to that. If this information is not helpful or useful to you in any way, please disregard it. Howdy folks, Lisa here again at Everything is a Lie. Welcome or welcome back as the case may be. Today I bring you another Cledon, or a spontaneous oracle delivered innocently by the speaker, pointing the way to your highest good, or maybe my highest good. Let's not rule that out. If this is our first meeting, I'm a 7-year hardened critical thinker, now YouTuber, and would-be escapee of our current financial system. If you need further introduction to me, please go back to some of my prior videos or the official channel intro and maybe start there. I asked Spirit if they wanted to start with a card today, and this little gem popped out of the deck. Smoke and Mirrors. I'll dedicate this to my greatest YouTube inspiration from back in 2017 during the Burke Street incident. Smoke and Mirrors. I think he's up to about his 8th channel now. So, Smoke and Mirrors. Can I do that while I read? Okay. Seeing through the lens of past conditioning. That's uncomfortable. The inability to recognize the truth of what is being offered, healing from misguided perceptions, moving beyond the illusion of separation, being accountable for your own biases and the way you view the world. We're actually built to view this world inaccurately. Our 5 senses tell us that we are separate from one another. We're conditioned to see time as linear. This creates a consciousness of delineation, separation, and finality. We have an innate fear that what we see is all there is. Although we know deep down there is more, we are suspicious of it. Our fear of death results from this kind of perception. The entire world is a construct of smoke and mirrors. Our job is to discover the truth that lies beyond this illusion. Discoveries at the frontiers of science align with what the ancients have known. At the atomic level, we are blinking lights and empty space. Consciousness is fundamental. Time can be bent, and we are eternal. Ask yourself if what you see is really what you're looking for. What do you sense beyond your intellectual assessment of what is? Can you drop into your heart and soul and call for a vision, a feeling, an awareness of the true and authentic? Every day, remind yourself that you are intrinsically connected to all life. The universe needs you to learn about it. You have within you extraordinary magic with which to co-create life beyond your wildest expectations. Today, trust the inner voice that reminds you that you truly will find what you seek and more, even if outer conditions appear to challenge that. It's all smoke and mirrors. Things are not exactly what they seem. That's I should tell you who that is. Oracle of the 7 Energies. It's a Colette Baron Reid deck. I have a couple of hers now. I'm up to 9 decks at present. Ask me next year why I have no money, because I have too many tarot decks. Okay, I thought my last video was going to be some kind of great release. It took a long time and I had a lot of restless nights to finally get that done and out. There was very much a feeling of not being able to move forward in my life without making that video. The information that had revealed itself to me in the prior months left me feeling like I was holding out on you guys and it needed to be shared. Worse still, I felt like I was holding it in within me. I'll come back to all of that shortly after my current crisis is resolved. Crisis, you ask? What crisis, Lisa? Well, I'll explain about the banksters shortly. I'm also charged with not complying with a government order, which would result in me having to deprive myself of oxygen. That carries a potential $50,000 fine or a year imprisonment in Western Australia. Of course, I could initially have just paid the $1,000 fine and left it at that. But that sounded way too much like outright extortion, if you ask me. Give us $1,000 or we'll make you pay more. I don't participate in abusive relationships any longer, not even with the government. I'm still due back in court over that. Needless to say, this is not a good time for me to be writing and producing this video, but oh no, Spirit says, you must do this now, whilst you are still feeling vulnerable and stuck. I would preferably have waited, and then I could recount the happy tales of how everything worked out perfectly in the end, as it usually does in its own kind of way. But apparently now, as guided, is divine time. And it turns out that they actually meant this video was the one I had to do. A quote, "I am the instrument through which God is acting." Neville Goddard. And I'm not really all that stuck, by the way. I'm just not thrilled about having to choose either the rock or the hard place I seem to be presented with. Don't I get a third option? Of course, I get to make another video. And I am now in a place of complete surrender. I choose to live up to my greatest potential, not to be forced back into old, outmoded ways of being a victim of anyone or the system. All of my efforting to try and achieve what I can't even see as possible right now myself doesn't mean it won't work out. But I also acknowledge that trying to control the outcome is pushing against divine timing and potentially greater outcomes in the future that I don't even imagine or see myself. That happens to be sitting there, willing release. So, that's been a recurrent theme lately for me in many ways. Confirmed again this morning by the lovely Emma at New Era, where she talked about forcing things into place that really don't fit or are just not ready to come into being. Give it to God and go dancing is a good one, but unfortunately, due to the mandate, I've given up dancing lessons as well. In any case, I've done the best I could with what I had, and I'm okay with that. I still have another week to get a little bit more done, so back to matters at hand. Today I'll recap where I'm at regarding the previous episodes around money, the vultures and the banksters. We'll also talk about some of the other stuff going on for me, Lisa, the unlikely YouTuber and messenger that I have unwittingly become. Apparently we needed light workers. Okay, I'll give it a crack. Do I put that on the CV as well? And as I had promised, a list of reasons why I have no money. I think it's appropriate, as always, to start off with some gratitude. I am grateful for Camp Como, my unfinished symphony, my home and haven. I'm still here for now, at least. That's what it is to me. Although the door needs some work, it needs a good coat of paint and a patch up where I tried to break in when I locked myself out. The door to personal healing and happiness. I'm also grateful for the Marine Coxswains course I completed last year and the chance to pilot this lovely old dame, the Brockman, out of Fremantle Fishing Boat Harbour with multiple dolphins on the bow. I felt deeply honoured to have them escort me. I'm also grateful to the Australian government for covering half the cost of that course as well. but only because I'm so unemployable that I need more skills. I'm grateful for the increase in my clairaudient abilities and the kind and learned medical professional who reminded me that it was a gift and that I should develop it. Now that's a doctor. You don't meet many like that, and I usually avoid them. I'm grateful for the ridiculous number of times that I've been reassured by Spirit that they have my back and that I'm protected and that it's okay to walk a path that's completely different to other people's. Your path or your destiny is between you and Spirit or God, Creator, or however you choose to see that. It wasn't a conference call. It was a one-on-one deal. Guidance and spiritual connection is available to us all, and it is unique to us all as well. I'm also grateful for all the songs I get as confirmation and inspiration. I get a lot of guidance in the form of lyrics from random songs and all the crazy repetitive numbers and strange serendipitous occurrences and coincidences that answer my questions. And finally, I'm grateful for my dad. As I've stated in previous videos, that was never an easy relationship for me. But after requesting the assistance of Spirit to better tune into my clairaudience, I somehow accidentally worked out that I could talk to my dad. I had a hint that he was there a few months before that when I saw a reflection in the bottom of the glass sliding door of someone's legs dressed in white pants passing behind me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The roller blind was about 2/3 of the way down, but not all the way, so I could only see legs when I looked behind me. And there was nothing there. Sorry, I could only see legs, but when I looked behind me, there was nothing there. I looked outside, sort of peering through the glass, absolutely sure it must be someone outside in the yard. But the motion sensor light had not activated, and it was pitch black out there. Again, the legs reflected in the glass passed back the other way behind me. Again, there was nothing there. Nothing physical. I'd never previously seen a ghost, although I had thought maybe I had felt them. It was only after throwing it out there on Facebook that a lovely old school friend suggested it was my dad. Here was me thinking it was maybe one of the Bee Gees. Dad was an avid lawn bowler for most of his life, hence the cream or white pants as I was seeing. He died leaving his weekly bowls match. He didn't even make it into the car. He died in the car park. Many ancient cultures say we walk with our ancestors. My much-loved grandpa is apparently with my son, and my nan with my daughter too. I've had some really healing conversations with Dad in the past few months, and I do realise how ridiculous that might sound to the average person. But we get on a lot better now that he's passed and he's released all of his earthly conditioning and the limitations of 3D life. I asked him how long he'd been here. 7 years since he first passed. I asked, what, even when I was cursing you? He replied, you still are. Now, to previous business arising. Have I been a good girl and paid all my bills? Nah, still not. As previously stipulated, I've only paid for my internet and phone. These are with private companies and essential to what I do. 3 years ago, I posed the question, what if you don't pay? Try it, was the response I heard back. Having known that some kind of world crisis and ultimate power grab was coming, I felt impelled to be a test case. Someone who can say honestly to your face, nothing has happened. They trigger me, nothing physical. They send bills, I generally ignore them. If they phone, I say I can't afford them. Is that a particularly good way to live? Probably not. But it gives me the opportunity to tell those who are struggling right now that it's okay. You must feed yourself and house yourself as best you can. Assure you and your family's well-being and safety, and do not be bullied or guilted into paying petty bills that you can't afford, especially those from your government or the governmentaceutical overlords, as I usually refer to them, or banksters and debt collectors. This is a time of honouring the self. Make your financial decisions based on your own highest good and empowerment. Sorry about that. That's my dinner. Do not make decisions based on fear. It's high time we stopped that silliness and stood down our financial abusers. It might also be appropriate here to add, stop funding criminals wherever you can. Now to the vultures, the credit card debt collectors, or the vultures as I prefer to call them. The last time we spoke back in May last year, I think I was going to send more letters in regards to the remaining 2 credit card debts currently with a vulture or a member of the Debt Buyers Association of Australia. That was until that particular vulture wrote to me and threatened legal action last June. Officially, it was a notice of intention to commence legal proceedings. The letter was rather intriguing. First, they said that the former bankster had assigned absolutely all its legal and beneficial rights, title and interest to them, which was an outright lie because another vulture or debt buyer had already claimed that before they had on-sold that debt to them. As previously discussed in the Money Series number 2, please go back and review those videos if you are struggling with credit card debt at the moment. Then they stated that I was in default of the contract. That would be the contract they failed to send me in response to my letters. The completely fictitious one. The one that I knew they couldn't supply because I'd never signed one with them. They also gave me 30 days to settle the debt in full with interest, or they may commence legal proceedings. I had a couple of phone calls, texts and emails over the next month requesting my response urgently, to which I didn't respond to any of them. No energy investment whatsoever. Guess what happened next? Nothing. They went back to sending periodical offers to engage with them, which I continue to ignore. They make the offer. I choose not to engage with it. Their offer requires my acceptance for us to have any kind of contract. No deal. Now, the banksters. Last we discussed the banksters. I think I mentioned in a channel update that with my mortgage, I was lodging a complaint with AFCA against them for giving me false or incorrect information. And then I just stopped paying the mortgage again. By the time the complaint was dealt with, nearly 3 months had passed, and I was having a high time doing that boating course I mentioned. Mediated negotiations went well. They refunded the charges from the failed voluntary assisted sale, and then they granted me 4 months to arrange the sale of the property and another 2 months for the sale to be finalised. No mortgage payments required. Bonus. But I missed that deadline too. Oops, sorry banksters. And I've been granted another 4 weeks extension while I endeavour to get the kitchen finished, ready to sell. Sadly, I've had to start paying the mortgage again this month, but c'est la vie. The kitchen is getting done and it's very exciting after such a long wait. To fund this venture, I borrowed a few $1,000s from my mother instead of refusing her offer again, and I withdrew some of my superannuation. I've also had to cash out my modest silver investment, but I am proceeding and I'm ready to pull the pin even if it's not complete on time. It's definitely far better than it was, and it's a joy to see the dream of the kitchen fulfilled in at least some part. It's also been very stressful and hard work at times, especially living without a kitchen. But it's rewarding And it was a conscious choice to try and finish what I started way back in 2015. Camp Como. That one comes up a lot. There's no place like home. Camp Como has given me so much over the past 6.5 years. It's the longest I've lived anywhere apart from my first childhood home. And it was my deep desire to finish the kitchen after first having started by having a wall removed from it when I first moved in. But it's definitely time to move on now. I'm more than ready. Hopefully the house will be too. And not really how I expected things to go. But I'm going with guidance, and I'm tired of waiting for external circumstances when there's things I want to do. So last time we were trapped at the Page of Swords, and that was Spirit's interpretation, not the traditional meaning, the better to stalk than talk, or the harsh truth, or whatever the traditional meaning of the card is. I was continuing to upskill whilst taking my time to try and honour more of my personal needs. Unfortunately, that meant more delays for the channel. I also took time out of working to complete a 9-week course in boating, but due to our social security requirements in Australia, we must apply for a certain number of jobs each month to get payments. Somehow I accidentally ended up with 3. Back onto the hamster wheel I went until those Kung Flu government mandates at the end of December, and my other contract job ended at the end of January. I'm concentrating on what I want to do at the moment, the work on the house, the videos, and the ongoing healing. This really is a time for me to close out that transitional phase of my life. I can't stall it any longer, and I can't go on like this forever, or I'll be eternally balanced on the edge of that sword between the two worlds. Okay, so as promised, my list of reasons why I have no money. I never made money the priority in my life. I had negative judgments about money and wealth. I never thought it that important. I made choices based on different factors such as ethics, integrity, health and well-being, my children's needs. I dislike greed and waste, which are often associated with wealthy people. Identifying as middle class or average. Wanting to remain independent. Refusing to ask for assistance when needed. Lack consciousness. I can't afford it. Also, I just want enough to pay the bills, and other self-limiting statements to that effect. Your word is your wand. I allowed others to dictate my choices or place constraints on me, undervaluing my own worth and abilities. I blamed other people and external influences rather than looking within. Conformity, the program, the system, and spending money on its worthless ventures. Credit card interest. And finally, I thought working hard was the only way to get it. Note that this list has grown over time as I peel away the layers of self-limiting beliefs I've lived under. Feel free to drop any of yours in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Now to new business arising. I'm going to expand a little on what many refer to as shadow work, or tell a couple of tales if you prefer. How does shadow work look to me? But before this, I've been called to read to you from the Shaman's Dream Oracle. Hopefully I can get through this card okay without crying. I've had a few practices. It always gets me. Number 46, Root Girl, the Disowned Self. Can you see her? Wait, don't drop the book. That's her little face there. Okay. So, root girl, the disowned self, hidden beauty, the need for acceptance and love. Root girl sits shivering, unclean and naked at the base of the tree of self. She is unloved, unwanted and shunned for her deformities. She has no home, but is safe burrowing underground to dwell near the deepest roots of this sacred tree. Who is she to you? Could this urchin be the one part of you that, reintegrated, can lead you to wholeness and true purpose? This is a part of you, the embodiment of a deeply flawed perception of your failures, manifesting as guilt and shame. When you project envy onto others or any emotion or instinct that you've learned to repress or deem unnatural, it's this homeless child self crying out for attention, acceptance and love. You want to lash out, ignore it, push it aside, all the while refusing to acknowledge this ugly quality as belonging to you. But if you would only look into the root girl's eyes and see the beauty and the unmet need, your unmet need, you would realize that this part of you asks for your compassion and understanding. This part of you was born when you were wounded and were conditioned to believe you're not whole, that your expression of self is somehow too much or too little. You may have even inherited this creature from your ancestors. However it was, this child self came to be curled up at the roots of your sacred tree self. It's time to welcome her into your heart. When you do, everything you've been searching for becomes illuminated and your path lights up with renewed purpose. When you come to love root girl and claim her as your own, accepting her and your humanity, she is transformed just as you are. Then all manner of magic begins to arrive in abundant form. Look for the beauty. That's an incredible card. I didn't cry. That's what healing looks like, people. Okay, so I think we get the gist of shadow work now. So let's talk about what I refer to as the German accent and trauma. Is this perhaps ancestral? I don't think so, but I'm not ruling out the possibility. Last year, I'd been having problems leaving my job at the yacht club after deciding that of 3 jobs, that was the one that should go. I was a bit fed up with the late night finishes and the impact on sleep and health that was having. Why was I having problems leaving? Seems like an easy thing to quit a casual job, right? My manager, we'll call her Heidi here because she's German and she hates that. Heidi simply didn't want me to leave and really needed the staff. Of all the management there, she was by far the favourite, and I'd really enjoyed working with her for the preceding year, and I'd learned a lot from her. Problem was, she kept messaging and asking me to pick up a shift here and there, and I kept saying yes. Hello, Min. No. We're not having cats now. Hi, bye. Not happy. Saying yes to shifts. On analysis, I realised that I was just agreeing to work to please her. I liked her. I had a lot of respect for her and much empathy for how overworked she was. And I felt guilty when I said no to her. But guilt was not an appropriate response to not needing the work. And I had 2 other jobs. So I had guilt and I had fatigue. Bubby, you need to get out the way. Meanwhile, I'd taken a restaurant job, another thing for the CV, and because it was so close to home, I'd agreed to 2 nights per week, which sometimes became 3 if somebody else called sick. The manager, we'll call him Fritz for the sake of this story, Fritz often became a bit short and bordering on rude when things were busy. I didn't like that. I often felt uncomfortable and I felt like I'd done something wrong or that he didn't like me. You want to go? Let go. Initially, I just tried to work harder at anticipating his requirements, at improving my speed and efficiency, looking for ways I could do better. One night when I was working rather furiously and thinking about quitting purely because of his rudeness, he turned to me and said, "I don't know where I'd be without you tonight, Lisa." Huh? Really? From his behaviour, I thought Fritz was ready to fire me. I quietly mentioned it to a couple of the other staff who confirmed that he was like that with all of them. And one even justified it by suggesting that he just doesn't cope well with stress. I couldn't fathom why it bothered me so much, though, why I was triggered so much by it, but I was rapidly getting over it and the job. I compared the two management styles. Both Fritz and Heidi shared that same abruptness that German people sometimes have. Yet with Heidi, I had no problem. I never felt she was rude, just direct. I respected it, and I felt respected by her too. He continued to trigger me though. The only other commonality between the two of them was the German accent. It took some days of wondering why I hated working for him so much before I had a memory of my third grade teacher, also a German accent, Mrs. Howie. She was often a kind and caring woman. I remembered the time Tony Doggett fell asleep in class. He fell out of his desk even without waking up and continued sleeping on the floor. She just kept teaching and hushed us all to let him sleep as he'd had a difficult weekend or whatever the reason was. I also remembered how fiery she became sometimes. She was prone to some rather alarming rages. I'd seen her slam books on people's desks, slapping children's legs, even shaming and humiliating my classmates at times. Suddenly these strong memories made me realise how much harder I'd worked in that class, purely so as not to attract her anger or negative attention, and to please her. It felt good to be praised by her. Key words here: authority, respect, self-respect, childhood trauma, self-worth or value, and the big kicker for me, people-pleasing. I was still carrying that one around. I was working harder than I wanted or needed to, purely to please authoritarian figures, and I'd been doing that since I was a child. Work hard. If that's not enough, work harder. A long list of examples of that flowed through my mind, including several jobs, relationships, years of performance reviews, overcompensating with my kids for their lack of a father, and a deeply held fear of disappointing other people, especially my dad. It also made me think a lot about financial abuse, Stockholm Syndrome, and the manipulation that is the current financial system with its medical mafiosa behind it. While self-judgment is an issue here, for example, I'm not doing or being good enough, guilt and self-punishment were a far greater issue. I was doggedly pushing myself harder, unnecessarily, without ever understanding why or pushing back. Saying no and standing up for myself would only happen on exhaustion or burnout, usually accompanied by some emotional outburst. Being hard on yourself comes easy for us Virgos. We always check ourselves. Well, usually, once we wake up. Being kind and compassionate to yourself takes precedence here now. That's a new paradigm for me. Not waiting for anyone else anymore. It's me who sets the boundaries on how hard I work and when. I'm having to learn to be compassionate with me, to know when to stop, and to put my own needs first. Now to other boundaries also affecting my relationship with money or money and relationships. For this one, the temple path kept coming up. This was a funny one. I started getting this card a lot when I was making the St. Mary's Cathedral video, and then still through the New Norcia video. So I was thinking it would stop coming up so often when those videos were done. I've made the videos. I've followed the guidance. But for a short while it did, and then it was back. I asked, so what does this mean? Why is this here again? Get thee to a convent was what came back. So rude, Spirit. And just how long do I have to be in the convent? At first I thought that was rather harsh because it had felt like I'd been in one for years already anyway. But the messages I'd been getting around relationships, especially physical ones, regarding energy exchange and demons, if you will, unhealed partners bringing their issues into my life, or more to the point, me now learning to block them from doing that. I'd learned a lot about boundaries by this point in my life, things I should probably have learnt much earlier but didn't. I'd learned how to make sacrifices, always to try to get somewhere or something better, but I was also sacrificing my self-respect, my self-worth, my happiness, and my integrity. My emotional needs and my happiness were unimportant, often based purely on financial constraints, usually as dictated by someone else. What being in relationships, and particularly my marriage, had mostly taught me was a lot of how to rob Peter to pay Paul, with me often ending up playing the role of Peter. I'd spent a lot of my time trying to see the best in others, the potential, not the reality. The reality was they didn't see it themselves, and they certainly didn't see mine either. I also learnt about the empath-narcissist dynamic, which I won't delve into at this time. There's lots of videos on YouTube about that already. Look it up if you think it's an issue. I'd been on my own since my former narcissist, partner, had left the country back in September 2018. But I felt like I'd been on my own for a long time already before that. The last-ditch attempt to save the relationship was the closing chapter in a long and difficult journey that was, for all intents and purposes, already over for me. I'd gone from hope to hopeless, and then to just plain hard and cold. When I bought the house, he'd been digging himself a huge financial hole, and I'd already washed my hands of it. Previous attempts at sorting that out just left me alone and trapped in a lease I couldn't afford on one income, and with a $17,000 tax debt. During a subsequent discussion with my accountant, who had known the backstory of our joint money issues and the unpaid taxes he was refusing to deal with, I'd said we were still in contact but not really together, and no, he still wasn't paying those taxes. Please don't misconstrue that I'm an advocate of taxes. This was years ago and a different time before this current journey. So later that week, my accountant had phoned me on a Sunday morning. Simon, why are you calling me on a Sunday? He recounted how he'd been lying awake during the night, and he'd thought about the tax implications if I were to let said ex move into my house. As a de facto or live-in relationship in Australia, it has the same implications as a marriage after only 6 months, according to the Australian Taxation Office, and they could legally take me to court for my house as payment for his debts. Don't let him move in, whatever you do, was what I was being told. Okay, fair call. I wasn't planning on it, but good to know. Thank you, Simon. Message received. By the time he had tried one last time to salvage the relationship, I decided it really was not salvageable. He had 3 years of unpaid taxes, virtually no assets, and no way out of that debt. Bankruptcy had been the only potential solution presented in that 3 years' time. So, to cut a long, unpleasant story short, he finally declared bankruptcy and went through the motions of unloading over $100,000 in tax debt for the minor administration fee of about $900. I hope if anyone is out there looking for a solution, and this is it, you will look further into that. Needless to say, the relationship was not salvageable, and I'd become crystal clear on that. He put me through too much for too long, and I'd become fully aware of the real nature of the problem. He wasn't a narcissist, of course not, but his mother was. Back to the point. Within a month or two of declaring bankruptcy, he found a job back in his home country, and his mother was encouraging him to come home, his father nearing the end of his days. And I wanted him gone. I wanted it to be over. And the Australian government, in all their wisdom, gave his departure from Australia the big green light. He was completely unrestricted only a month after declaring bankruptcy. You don't owe us anything now. You don't even have to come back. Catch ya. Whilst that relationship had been a catalyst for me in many other ways in this story, the biggest kicker was they don't care about the money. His bankruptcy was minor compared to many of the big guns that shirk massive debts, and his debts were mostly with the all-powerful government. Now, just for anyone's information, bankruptcy is 3 years in Australia. If you own a home, it's not really the best option. There are other options, as stated in my other videos. For me, having the home, it wasn't an option. Back to the story. I was stunned, to say the least, but also relieved that that chapter of my life could finally close. The incident was also a catalyst in starting this journey. It's been a long road back to health and happiness, though, and has made me very careful of relationships since. But this doesn't always occur in love relationships. It plays out in family dynamics, even friendships, and even Dad won't mind if I drop his name here. But the biggest way this is playing out currently in the world is the ongoing financial coercion from the government. So, the temple path it was for me, and I briefly diverted from the path last year, and it was a mistake. So, yes, Spirit, I hear you. How did I end up in such a mess regarding money and relationships? It all boiled down to one fundamental underlying attitude. Never put money over love. There's Dad again. In not wanting to become our parents, we often overcorrect in the opposite direction. I always resent that he put money first when I was a child. As the little root girl, I took it personally to mean that I was unimportant, unworthy, or unloved. Time was money to him, and he worked a lot and looked after himself. But it was not the case at all. But these decisions that we make about ourselves, especially as children, stay with us, and they hang around in our subconscious, dictating our future. In truth, I'd considered staying with the bad relationship just to relieve the financial burdens. But deep down, I could see that was what that was going to do for me. Or more to the point, that I was going to seriously lose my shizzle if I had to go through any more of that. So as I wrap up today, I feel the need to acknowledge life itself as a frequency. Now, I'm not going to get all Abraham Hicks on you, but there's a heck of a lot in that. For me, what am I adding to the collective, to the vibration of the world and all its inhabitants? Am I contributing overwork, depletion, fear, restriction, lack, poverty consciousness? I am responsible for my own vibration. The frequency of my life is my responsibility, and the way life reverberates back to me is also dependent on that frequency, the law of cause and effect. Previously, life has always been lived according to what bills are due next week and next month, and bearing the stress of that. One of the biggest revelations I've had recently is just how much I'm still prone to limit my own joy and happiness in favour of money or saving money or working hard for money, producing something instead of being something. The idea that I'm not contributing unless it's in a physical, tangible way. It's often me deciding that I haven't worked hard enough or long enough to deserve success or wealth, or to reward myself, or just be at peace and rest easy, knowing that I have done enough and that any more is just forcing things to happen and trying to control uncontrollable outcomes. Here, Mum has been a living example and throwing it back in my face if there's anything unhealed there. She's been in her house 20 years now since we first moved to Perth. In 20 years, she's complained every summer about the heat and her lack of air conditioning, whilst all the while having the money and the time to do something about it. The same with her decrepit old car. No air conditioning, no power steering, not even a radio, all the while having the funds and the time to make the changes to benefit herself. Oh, it's okay. Oh, it doesn't matter. I'll survive, and all those excuses. It's just. How many times do we hear that lately? It's just this or it's just that. It's just a mask. And one more thing on limiting my own joy. The dark wins when you limit your own light. I wish I knew who to credit that to. No physical devil actually required, no unfair or arcane system needed. I've been doing it to myself all along by allowing it to be that way. I'll leave it there for now, folks, for today. Feel free to add your thoughts in the comments. We all have our own stories and experiences here. Share. Sharing is caring. Thank you so much for joining me. Send me some good vibes, please, in regards to the house. It's a big, bold move for me, and it's not quite over yet. I'm not sure if I'll get another video done before I have to move, but apparently it's not up to me anymore either. Thank you, Spirit, for calling me out. Learn one, do one, teach one, as the saying goes. Thanks to all my subscribers. I really appreciate the support. And welcome to the new subscribers. I'm honoured to have you. Take care, peeps. Stay strong and vibe high. Look after yourselves. Be gentle with yourselves. Lots of love. Catch you next time. Bye.